Hey there, art nerds. So today we're taking a look at something you have probably seen other YouTubers talk about before, but I am here to put my own spin on it and hopefully make it worth your while. Inside this package from St. Louis Art Supply is the new Kuretake Gansai Tambi colors, and they look like beautiful Art Nouveau colors, and I am really excited to unbox, swatch, and make some art with them with you guys today. So the eco-friendly person in me loves the reusable mailers that don't have like the bubble wrap inside, that have like basically dryer lint inside. But the art supply reviewer in me hates them because they always leave a mess and they start triggering my allergies. So I guess we're gonna chalk this one up as one for the planet, taking one for the team. So inside my package was this beautiful Gansai Tambi set, a very cute sticker, too bad I'm from New Orleans, and a St. Louis Art Supply ruler, which I actually like to stash these because when do you not need a little pocket ruler? This is such a good pack-in for an art supply store. So if you're not familiar with St. Louis Art Supply, I have ordered that from them before. We don't have any kind of a working relationship. This was purchased out of pocket. So, you know, all opinions are my own. I paid $36.95 for this set. I bought it a while back, but I've been so busy with so many other things, like painting comic pages, for example, that I didn't have a chance to unbox it. But I am really excited to go ahead, unbox it, swatch it, and make some art with you guys today. So if you guys have watched the channel for a while, I like this style of Gansai watercolors. Gansai watercolors are formulated a little bit differently than Western watercolors. They typically use, this is a Korean example, but an animal hide glue to hold the pigments in solution, rather than using, I don't have any gum arabic handy, otherwise I would show you guys the gum arabic, rather than using gum arabic or aquazol or honey the way many Western formulations use. Now, are these using animal hide glue? I can't 100% tell you one way or the other. They activate very quickly and they don't have some of the needs that traditional Japanese watercolor really need. So I would say they're probably using a different formulation that activates a little bit more quickly. But you guys have seen me review a lot of Gansai style watercolors over the years. If you want to see more of them, if you're curious about what else is out there, including Kuretake Gansai Tambi, I will put a playlist down in the description below. I also have the show notes as well as a link to where you can order these if you so desire. I purchased the Kuretake Gansai Tambi Art Nouveau set of 24 from St. Louis Art Supply, and I paid $36.95 for it. They also have refills and individual colors available. Now, these types of watercolors are really formulated for Etegami style postcards, and I've done a bunch of tutorials on different Etegami designs. I'm probably going to do an Etegami postcard or a bookmark with you guys today towards the end of the video as part of like the mini field test, but I also want to try painting something more illustrative, something in my usual watercolor style with these as well. So it's going to be a little bit of a twofer, but that is probably going to be in a follow-up video. So these pretty little postcards are all examples of Etegami watercolor. They are done on special Etegami watercolor postcard paper. I think St. Louis Art Supply sells that as well. There's several different types. and I've talked about them when I actually did the tutorials that I've shared for these here on YouTube. So I'm not going to go into too much depth about the paper, but really it's meant to be kind of a faster, looser watercolor style. The whole point is for just average, regular people who might not be the best artists to capture the moment, to capture something seasonal, to capture a sentiment, to paint it and then send that postcard off to somebody else to bring a little bit of joy or a little bit of cheer. And I love that. It's so approachable, it's so accessible. You don't have to be perfect. It's just such a wonderful sentiment, because I really feel like everyone who can make art should make art, and it should be part of our daily life, whether you are making fiber arts, sewing, crocheting, embroidery, or sculpture, pottery, watercolor, comics. Any of those are just phenomenal. I think everyone should express themselves creatively and value that expression in other people. So obviously, this is my jam. This is their new color range. I believe it came out in 2022. Yes, it is 2023. Japanese traditional paint Japanese traditional paint for professional artists and crafters. It can be used as gouache and watered down as a watercolor. Ideal for sketch, illustration, card making, and more. And we also have the colors all right here, which is so nice because when I first got into Gansai watercolors, I was using Google Translate a lot. So it is recognizable by its vivid color and quick dissolution. It fulfills the needs of many creators in their pursuit of beauty in their artwork. And I believe that is true. These things took the internet, took YouTube, took crafters by storm in like 2015, and people have not looked back. So anything that makes watercolor more accessible to more people, is easy and fun to use, I am in favor of it. Wide range of vivid, rich colors. Beautiful Japanese colors included in this series. A wide range of vivid colors can be used without mixing colors. So that's another thing about Gansai, is you're not really going to be doing a lot of color mixing. And when I do the bigger Western style tutorial, I may pull out my other Kuretake Gansai sets to help augment this one if I don't have the colors I need, but we'll see about that later on. Various expressions. Water-based pigment paint can be highly opaque when used solely as a gouache, but it can also become more transparent depending on the amount of water added for dilution. Usability. It is a solid type of watercolor pressed into pans that can be prepped and cleaned up quickly and easily dissolves in water. Apply water brush with color to activate it. Gansai pans may exhibit cracking due to extreme dryness. However, it does not affect their quality. Occasionally, Gansai pan texture may look rough due to tiny air bubbles which can occur during production, which does not affect their quality. Please create a color chart by painting the color onto the chart on the back side of the lid. Not intended for use by children. When storing, keep Gansai pan horizontal with palette facing up. Do not leave in direct sunlight or in high temperatures. Do not use for a purpose other than as intended, like don't paint on your body with it. Wash your brush after use. Make sure palette is dry before storing. And then we have some QR codes. So I am hoping I can use the screen recorder and also the QR code reader on my phone. It looks like I can. Awesome. Open link. 1 bajillion tabs. Now the formatting on the screen is going to be horizontal. I apologize if that makes y'all sick. So this is in Japanese. This is the color chart. They also have the graphite colors. I'll be talking about those soon as well because that is right up my alley. They have the beautiful, this is like the anniversary box. Am I going to be reviewing it? No, because I already have many of these sets. I don't really feel the need to buy repeat colors, but if this seems like your jam and you're one of those, I need all of the colors, this could be a good one for you. This is the set we're taking a look at today. You can also get individual pans, and these are actually larger than regular pans. You can get the individual pans on all kinds of websites, including St. Louis Art Supply, but I think also Blick. And I'm gonna breeze through this quickly because I love the art gallery. I'm gonna have to go back and look at these because this is just always so inspiring. Okay, let's see if we can get the English version this time. It doesn't look like it wants to. No, no, I can't seem to do that and screen record, so give me a minute. All right, after it glitched out for a while, it actually pulled it up. Still all horizontal though. I am not going to read the whole thing for you guys, but we'll take a look at the URL. So it's gansaitambi.jp/en/index.html. So if you guys want to check this out in English, I'll link it for you guys in the description. They have 100 colors in this range. They also have a color chart that you could print out and actually paint in. I appreciate that, because then you can do it on the paper of your choice. If you're one of those who everything has to be neat and tidy and my watercolor swatches drive you nuts, that could be the way to go. So I guess these are the gofun white. So using chalk, like oyster chalk, mixed in with these colors to get what I've also seen sold as like a more randy or a macaron color palette. And then they also have the different products. Sorry if the horizontal is just not working for you guys. I'm actually looking at this with my head tilted if it makes you guys feel any better. I think this is the palette that I have, is the 36 colors. Oh, and then with the, doggone it, with this one, I also bought, you guys can't see my gestures, but I also bought and reviewed, they introduced like a pastel line. And that's not included in the set we're talking about today. So I have those as well. Basically, the only ones I'm not really that interested in are the metallics. I think I do have the gold metallics, and I think I talked about them in a big showdown of different metallic paints. But typically, I'm going to buy the colors I think I will use, the colors that spark my inspiration. And that's why we're taking a look at the palette that we're taking a look at today. So they do ask, are these light fast? Since Gansai Tambi is a pigment-based paint, it is light fast as long as not too much water is mixed in. I mean, there's different degrees of light fastness. I'm not going to be doing the light fast testing here, but I think Kimberly Crick does a lot of light fast testing for different brands, so you might want to check out her YouTube channel or her blog to see if she did these. But please be noted that the more water is mixed in, the weaker the light fastness becomes. Also, the light fastness depends on the colors. Yeah, that's really, the light fastness depends on the colors. For those of you who want to know if these are vegan, any animal-based material is not used for the items below in the process of manufacturing in our factories, and that's for the 48 color set. What kind of binder? Water-soluble resin is used. Okay, so that would be why they reactivate pretty well rather than requiring hot water. And these are for both professionals and beginners. And yes, they do have refills. And then here is their beautiful gallery again. So before we dive too deep into these, I do want to point out when you are unwrapping them from the bag, I want you guys to unwrap them the same way I did, because these are not secure in here. You can double stick tape them down, but they're not super well suited for travel in this current iteration. You might want to tape these down or put them in a different palette, whatever works for you, but they're going to go all over the place if you don't do something to secure them. Usually what I'll do is I'll tape them in, and then if I have to travel with them, I'll use a little bit of washi tape just to hold the cover on, or a rubber band, something like that. But you don't want them to go all over the place, especially because although we have the names in English up here, we don't have the names in English over here. So if you don't read Japanese, you're in trouble. But they do have the names printed in English on the back, which is awesome, because if you guys have been hanging out with me since 2018, you'll remember when I went on a trip to Japan, and I have a bunch of videos about Japanese art supplies and shopping for Japanese art supplies and what I bought while I was in Japan, and then reviews of the things that I bought while I was in Japan. And I'll link that playlist for you guys. I hope you guys will check it out, because I think if you dig art supplies, especially Japanese art supplies, you'll really dig that playlist. But everything was written in Japanese. Thank goodness for Google Translate, because I would have been SOL. So what we have is pretty simple. We have the exterior wrapping, fairly minimal. I appreciate that. We have this plastic liner. I like to keep the plastic liner because it also helps protect the paints. It helps keep them from drying out too quickly. And it just kind of helps as like a buffer between the lid and the paints to keep them from moving around too much. You can also, if you really want to, use this as a mixing surface. So it's just kind of handy to keep. And also I'm a magpie who can't seem to throw away anything. We have the interior of the lid, which has all the colors written down. We are going to swatch on this, but we're also going to swatch on Blick Studio Cotton Rag watercolor paper, because this is a coated paper stock. It's not going to give you the best idea of what these colors are going to look like. And then we have this paperwork here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this part off and double stick tape it to the front so that it's easy for me to tell which palette is which. Now for Etegami style watercolor and for these paints, Kuretake really pushes the water brush. That's fine if you like water brushes. I kind of struggle to use them, so I'm going to get just a regular old watercolor round for our swatches. So I'm going to go get a cup of clean water, my brush, and some paper towels, and I'll be right back. I'm not going to pre-activate these paints because Kuretake's Gansai Tambi style paints really do better if you don't add a lot of water to them first. The colors in this set on the first row are 404 Saffron Yellow, 405 Green Gold, 401 Flax Beige, 16 Ecru Beige. In row 2, 18 Pale Pink, 17 Coral Pink, 19 Potter's Pink, 302 Vermilion. In row 3, 304 Alizarin Crimson, 303 Mauve Taupe, 301 Old Mauve, 601 Grayish Blue, and I know some of y'all say Mauve and Mauve. Row 4, 602 Cobalt Turquoise Light, 15 Pale Aqua, 503 Cobalt Green, 502 Billiard Green. In row 5, 506 Shadow Green, 501 Pea Green, 505 Ivy Green, 504 Green Gray. In row 6, 406 Beige Gray, 49 Yellow Brown, 402 Mars Yellow, 403 Venetian Red. And these pollute the water quick, which is not surprising as they're gofun based, which means they've added oyster cell white. Kuretake mentions handling these like a gouache or a watercolor, so probably similar to Shin Han Pass. It might be worthwhile to swatch on black paper as well. These colors are really pretty. I'm not sure if the slight hint of gray is going to be apparent in the Blick swatches, but I'm excited to find out. So far, these are all super pretty, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they swatch on the Blick paper. They naturally also muddy the water quite a bit since they do have that white additive to create kind of this grayish pastel effect. Next up, we're going to swatch on the Blick Studio Cotton Rag paper. You guys know this from the Student Grade Showdown, but it is kind of basically just my de facto swatching paper for any of these because it really eliminates the guesswork. We know it's not going to be the paper. Whatever weird happens is going to be the paints. That said, I don't expect anything weird out of Kuretake Gansai Tambi. I've used Kuretake Gansai Tambi in one form or another for years, so I'm not really expecting anything unusual. So this is designed really for like a rice paper. Man, that packaging is just still all over the place. It's not really necessarily designed for this kind of a paper, but the cover illustration does look like, it's hard to tell, looks like it could have been done maybe on a Bristol or a hot press watercolor paper. So we're working on a cold press watercolor paper today, so we should see more granulation. I'm also going to put down a line of black Copic, and that will help us judge the opacity if that wasn't apparent from how muddy the water became. I'm going to go ahead and use a Copic marker to lay down some black lines, and this will help us judge the opacity. These watercolors don't have a whole lot of granulation, which is pretty in line with my experience with Gansai Tambi, so not unexpected. This kind of color palette has been showing up a lot on AliExpress with various brands, usually referred to as Morandi. Supervision has a Morandi set, and I believe Semi-Art does as well. It's sort of a muted pastel palette, one might say almost like old pastel or vintage colors. Colors are very pretty and obviously aren't very saturated. Gansai Tambi has plenty of saturated colors in the line. Colors activate very quickly, and if you're not familiar with them, they may soak up too much water. These absolutely do not need pre-activation, and I don't recommend pre-activating. They're going to glob up on your brush if they've absorbed too much water, so just kind of keep that in mind. And you may wish to work with a ceramic palette to help mix your colors. I'm not going to do color mixing because, one, these are desaturated pastel colors and don't really lean to clean mixes, so it would be difficult to judge anyway. Two, Gansai style watercolors aren't really designed for color mixing, although I've created pieces where I did just that with other Gansai Tambi palettes. I wanted to see how these might granulate out, so I'm doing a wet into wet dab test. With a lot of water, many of these colors do offer some granulation. I tried to cherry pick the colors most likely to granulate and granulate in a way that's noticeable on camera. So far, I think this is a beautiful addition to Kuretake's Gansai Tambi lineup. It doesn't seem like any of these colors are like directly in the other palettes. I'd have to double check and pull it out, but like their vermilion seems to be a little bit more of a muted vermilion than a really brilliant vermilion. Their Venetian red is definitely more muted as a Venetian red than like what I'm typically used to. So like, just off the top of my head and not pulling out my other palette, which honestly I'm not sure where it is right now, I would say these aren't like in those palettes. And that's the point. This is supposed to be like new colors for 2022. And it would be really just disappointing if Kuretake just kept, you know, repeating the same colors, because it would be difficult if you wanted to collect all of them. If you wanted the full range, it would be difficult to be able to add as new colors come out. This isn't really the kind of palette you would use for color mixing. One, because these are desaturated pastel colors and don't really lean towards clean mixes, so it'd be difficult to judge just how well they mix. And Gansai style watercolor aren't really designed for color mixing, although I have created pieces where I did just that with other Gansai Tambi palettes. It is possible. I don't know if this palette is really like great for color mixing. I really see this as an addition, unless you love these colors, which I love these colors, but I really see this as like an addition to their existing palettes, even if you just get kind of the basic color palette to add to this to make sure you have those colors. I did do a wet into wet dab test because I wanted to see how these might granulate out. I've been dealing with a lot of super granulating colors. Boku Undo has some really beautiful shadow and black colors, and Kuretake has those graphite colors that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, waiting on those to come in so I can compare them against some of the Boku Undo offerings. But I wanted to see how these might granulate out. With a lot of water, many of these colors do offer some granulation, not as necessarily smooth, and like these did really kind of rush to fill the whole swatch of water. But you guys can see, I'm going to point this out in this video because it comes up a lot in the student grade showdown. When I'm reviewing dye-based watercolors, it's like you get a solid fill of the color even after you've washed it out. With these, you can definitely see the line where the water was introduced and they start to graduate out. That's what I'm looking for. That's, you know, pigments behave that way. Really finely milled pigments behave more like this, where it's a more subtle shift, but you can still see the shift. But with these, when I dabbed in the water, and it wasn't the cleanest water, it was my rinse water from doing these swatches, so it's gotten pretty dirty by that point. But you can see some of these colors have some really nice granulation, and then some of these colors, they've added black in them to get that kind of shadow, that kind of softer gray effect. So if you add a lot of water to these, they may start to granulate out, which I love how that looks, but some of you guys might not like that so much. So I've been kind of thinking about whether I wanted to do an Etegami or if I wanted to do a bookmark, but I think I'm going to do the Etegami. I may end up doing the bookmark as well. These are just fun and they get my brain going, and I love that. They're making my brain go burr, which is what I've been needing because I've been feeling kind of uninspired lately. But I want to do this like circle wet into wet thing with these first, kind of working my way down. And then we're going to do an Etegami postcard together. And I was thinking, just based on this color palette, I was thinking maybe herbs or maybe lavender, something like that, that really has like the soft cottagecore, Moriki, muted vibes that I just happen to love. We're going to do a fun little bookmark project here. So I am working with a scrap of cotton rag watercolor paper cut to approximately the same size as a bookmark. I'm using a scrap of chipboard to help prevent it from buckling all over the place. And I am using some Nichiban artist masking tape to hold it down. This is super easy. If you can't paint circles, I struggle with painting circles, but even if you can't paint circles, it looks pretty anyway, and you can do other shapes, whatever you're really comfortable with. So we're basically just going to be working our way down the palette, letting them blend wet into wet, and just kind of working with what we have. So some areas are going to be much brighter than others, and we're just going to start back at the top and work our way down once we reach the end. So the colors that have the black additives seem to really stand out, and when used in wet into wet next to each other, that black tends to pollute the surrounding areas. For example, if you were using Venetian red from this set to mix skin tones, that speckly black would be very apparent. So you might want to mark it and only use it for uses where that speckle effect won't look bad. And these really put me in mind of some of the sets I've reviewed from AliExpress. It's like a better version of those, but still. I would recommend use with care, particularly for painting darker skin tones. The coral pink in the set is really pretty though. And I'd be interested in seeing the pigment info for this set, although I believe Gansai Tambi do use dyes. Once your bookmark has fully dried, you can peel away the tape at a 90-degree angle, and there you have it, a super easy to paint watercolor bookmark. I think this bookmark turned out super cute. I really love how the colors blend into each other, and I think it's a very simple but fun way to get to play with watercolor. It also gave me a chance to see some areas that make me a little bit concerned, so I want to put these to their intended use and try painting an Etegami postcard with them. So I've got a piece of chipboard, I've got some Kuretake Etegami postcards, and I'll try to link some for you guys down in the description below. I am going to fold over my tape and apply it to the back of the postcard. This is an artist tape, so it has a little bit less of a tack to it. I'm going to press it down firmly, and I was thinking it would be fun to paint some lavender. Generally, I would sketch my lavender in first and then paint on top of it, but I'm trying to freehand it and just go really loose with this one. If you're interested in Etegami or in painting flowers, I've got some tutorials here on the channel that I think you'll really enjoy, so make sure you check that description for more links and resources. Although this is a really pretty palette, in practice, I'm struggling to use it. Maybe it's the kind of work I make or the way I like to handle my paints, or maybe maybe I just wasn't feeling it when I painted this, or the subject matter didn't lend itself to the palette, although I did try to pick something that would. I felt like I really couldn't get the depth of saturation that I wanted. In a way, these sort of remind me of the Phoenix Chinese watercolors and how they handle for Etegami. I feel like on cotton rag paper, I was able to get a more nuance than I'm getting on the Etegami paper. So maybe this is a Gansai palette that's more suited to a cotton rag. Basically, my frustration stems from, one, in an Etegami style watercolor, these tend to really goop up, so nuance can be a challenge. These may just be a poor fit for the type of Etegami postcard that I'm using because there's a bunch of different types that do different things, and some are more suited to misty things. I struggle to use Kuretake Gansai Tambi for Etegami, and I actually prefer to use Mozart Komorebi, so this might just be a me thing. Two, these are both desaturated and opaque, which is a combo I struggle to use and control. Another thing that bothers me, and it's not the palette's fault necessarily, is that there isn't enough contrast in tone, not enough good mixing colors or really dark saturated colors, so it's hard to build up the contrast I want using this palette. When I'm working with art supplies that everyone else seems to like and that I should like, but I'm struggling to control or to make something that I like or feel satisfied with, it makes me question my ability as an artist. That's one of the reasons it's so important for me to review stuff y'all might use and share my thoughts, because if you're just starting out, you don't know if it's you or the supplies, and I want to help alleviate some of that frustration. Admittedly, this is not as good as it could have been. I could have salvaged it during inking if I'd taken my time and tried to clean it up and do it properly, but I was distracted by basil running all over my arm. At this point, I have several of these Kuretake Gansai palettes in different sizes. Do you guys have any suggestions on how I could organize my collection so it's more usable? I kind of wish Kuretake would release like maybe a tiered set that you could just click the pans into. But even so, if I wanted to use multiple palettes at one time, it would take up a lot of desk space and make it a little bit harder to use. So I'd really like to reorganize my collection into something that's a little bit more usable. Y'all, we have a lot to talk about this palette, about the art I can produce with it, about my frustrations with this palette, and about things that seem so promising and just kind of start to fall apart. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the Kuretake Gansai Tambi Art Nouveau palette. This is a very pretty color palette, and it might be great for like limited watercolor if you do maybe brush calligraphy, or you're just going to be adding like a little bit of color here and there and you don't really want to paint with a whole lot. It seems to get along well with cotton rag, but we're going to dig into that more if and when we do the field test. It activates quickly and easily, which I think is consistent with the other Gansai Tambis that I've checked out, Gansai Tambi that I've checked out here on the channel. The larger pans accommodate bigger brushes, so if you are painting a bigger illustration, you want to use a larger flat, you want to cover a wider area, these pans are a little bit easier to use. And if you like opaque watercolors, particularly pastels, you might like this set. And that brings us to the cons. I didn't like this set. I could not get it dark enough or saturated enough, like not even as dark as the mass tone, and that really frustrated me. This was particularly true with the Etegami, where I was really trying to get it darker. I didn't necessarily try as hard with this because I was just kind of noodling around and getting a feel for the watercolors. I'm also not really sure how this would lend itself to Etegami, so I'd really like to see some nice examples of this palette and how someone might use this palette for Etegami, because this is a mess. Like, I really struggled with this. I'm not really happy with it. And I gave it plenty of time. Now, it could have been the Etegami paper that I was using. There are different types of paper, but this is one that I've used before, and I feel like I can normally get it to do what I want it to do. And the whole point of Etegami is like very loose, very immediate. You don't really overwork it. The more you overwork it, the less it's gonna look good, the worse it's gonna become. Something else that I noticed, and this is what really kind of concerns me, is that the colors that have the black granulation, so you guys can kind of see it here, you guys could see it maybe with the Venetian red, they tend to take over and then the black leaches out, which pollutes other colors, particularly skin tones. So that's why I'm like, about doing a field test with this is there are some colors that would normally lend themselves really well to skin tones, like the Venetian red, really watered down, would make a really nice sort of burnt sienna based skin tone, but not with that black granulation going on in there. That is not going to work. So let's talk about the verdict. Y'all should know it is so easy for me to catch an allergic reaction to the hype bug, especially if it's in my hyperfixations. How much money have I spent on art supplies over the years because the hype got me hard? Like, this whole channel should have just been called The Hype Bit Me, because that's a lot of the reviews that I do. I see a product, it looks really promising, other artists seem to really like it, or at least their thumbnails act like they really like it, the buzz is good, but then I get it and I don't like it. And in a way, that's why I share this with you guys. One, to offset the cost of this addiction, and two, to maybe help other people figure out if it's a good fit for them and going to do what they wanted to do. That said, I fully realize how stubborn most artists are about not checking out reviews before buying. I'm one of them. Most of my artist friends are this way too. I'll sometimes look up reviews after, though, to see if I'm just like losing my marbles because I dislike an art supply that everybody else seems to love, to see if another artist I like, what they thought of the product that I either liked or didn't like, or just as like company while I'm working, or if I'm not feeling well. But honestly, regarding the Gansai Tambi Art Nouveau palette, I think I prefer the original Gansai Tambi palettes to the Art Nouveau palette, or to the pastel palette that I reviewed a couple years ago. While I love the look of the color palette, I struggle to use it in this format. I'm so reliant on the majority of my colors having translucency, which would better allow me to build up saturation and color. I'm torn about whether or not I should do the field test I have in mind, mostly because some of these colors contain secret black, and I'm worried that it'll deaden otherwise really pretty colors. You guys can really see that here. Like, this should have been a lot more vibrant and pretty than it actually ended up being. I may have to do like a combo and bring in some colors from my original Gansai Tambi palette and mark the colors that have black additives so there are no surprises. For Etegami, I ended up doing a bunch of lavender because I felt like they would really lend themselves to it, and I just really struggled the whole time. I'm really glad I didn't rely on just the initial swatches or just one of the 2 mini field tests to give me my verdict, because I feel like the paper choice can make a big difference with these. So just in case I didn't make my verdict clear about the Kuretake Gansai Tambi Art Nouveau set, the answer is I'm not digging it, okay? I might do a Western field test and change my mind, but when it came to Etegami, it just really wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, and there are other Kuretake Gansai Tambi palettes that I'm more interested in. So these are what the swatches look like. I think they are probably prettier if you're working on a cotton rag, and they are definitely a less is more watercolor. But even Etegami, which is a less is more art form, I found that I was just kind of struggling to make them work for me and struggling to get what I wanted out of them. And it's disappointing because I like the cover art. I like what the swatches look like. I wish I liked these. I tend to like these kinds of colors. I'm a fan of like Chinese watercolor. I am a fan of the Holbein Iridori look, the watercolor line. I haven't tried the gouache line yet. Now, they say it can be used as a gouache and watered down for use as a watercolor. I did not really find that they worked well as a gouache. I tried doing some thicker applications over the dark green with the greenish gold with the, I'm sorry, saffron yellow, trying to like draw in the stems. It just wasn't really happening. I did some splatter technique. It just really wasn't happening. So I'm kind of disappointed about that because I wanted to like this palette. Other people seem to like this palette. And whenever I do a review where everybody else likes it and I don't, it makes me wonder if I'm like missing something or I'm just not a good enough artist or what. And who likes feeling that way? And I don't like producing art that I'm just not happy about. Like, not every art piece is just gonna sing for you, but this one just kind of flopped, belly flopped. Am I telling you guys not to get the Art Nouveau set? Not necessarily. If you have a good use case for it, if you have a good idea of what it's capable of and you still want it, go for it. But I'm not recommending you get it either. It's not one of those go out and get your own. I'm not even 100% sure they did the art, how they did the art on the cover, although as I look closely at it, it does look kind of scrubby, and I can only imagine they did it real big. I'd like to see the original for this because I have a feeling it's really big, because the way some of these colors granulate, where the black granulates out and is noticeable, if you do smaller faces, that's gonna wreck the face. So you'd have to work really big, and then it's kind of a forgivable thing. So I hope this was helpful, useful, and informative for you guys. I was really hoping I'd love this palette. I have reviewed so many terrible student grade palettes. I was thinking this was surely gonna be a knockout out of the park. It was not. And following the CSY and Maritini sets that I thought were gonna be kind of fun, and they were also a flop, just kind of disappointing. I'm ready for a win here. So anyway, I will see you guys again soon. If you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, useful, and informative, please, you know what to do. Hit the like button, click the subscribe button, hit the bell notification. And if you'd like to check out more of like what I have for sale, like I have vinyl stickers, I have charms, I have keychains, I have books. You can find that at netasuit.com/shop. If I seem a little frazzled, I just got back from teaching a class and I'm trying to wrap this up, so my brain is like, cool, and I got up early, so I'm just not 100% right now. If you are looking for more easy and fun to paint watercolor bookmark tutorials, check out my Stash Buster series. And I will see you guys again, hopefully really soon, with another art supply review, tutorial, or maybe a combo like what we did today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye!